Okay, yesterday we talked what the capital of Alaska is. What is the capital of Alaska? Chayton?
Juneau.
Juneau. And would you point to Juneau on the map back there, please? And stay there for a second. Okay, now everyone take a look at where Juneau is. You can only get to Juneau by a bush plane or airplane or boat. There are no roads that lead into Juneau, in or out of Juneau, so the only way to get there is by boat or plane. Have a seat.
It doesn't look like a very big city.
Well, it's yeah, for Alaska standards it's big, but it's, and so if you notice, it's pretty far away from the rest of Alaska, but yeah, that's the only way to get there.
I don't get why they wouldn't choose like a town that's in the middle of Alaska.
Yeah, they've wanted to change it to Anchorage before, but people in Alaska are not big fans of change, so that would be one reason, but they've tried to move it, but people don't want to move it. So. It does make sense to have it somewhere else. And we said the nickname was The Last Frontier, if you remember correctly. TV show named after it. So you had to read the reading for today so we can talk about it. And the first part you read about was a guy by the name of Vitus Bering. And what can you tell me about Vitus Bering? What can you give me some information, Nate?
He's a Danish navigator.
Yeah, he was a navigator and explorer. Danish, meaning he was born in Denmark. And so he explored pretty much his entire life, and eventually he joined the Russian Navy and started exploring for Russia. And he was really starting to explore what area was he really starting to explore towards probably, I guess, the end of his life. Ethan?
Alaska.
Well, he never made it to Alaska, no. What area was he starting to really explore? You got Burley?
Asia?
The northern coast of Asia, and at that point in time, that part of Asia was really uncharted. People weren't sure whether or not Asia was connected to America. So they wanted to find this out, so he headed over to that area. He spent a lot of time traveling through Siberia and, kind of exploring that northeastern part of Asia. And when we got over to the part where you would be going over to America, what did he find out about it being connected? Were they connected?
No.
Jaden? Thanks for raising your hand, Jaden. No, they were not connected. At some point in time, they were connected via a land bridge. So he sailed through this strait, a waterway. He sailed through that strait, and now the strait bears his name, Bering Strait. All right. A lot of if you watch Deadliest Catch, they do a lot of fishing in that area, the Bering Sea and the Bering Strait. A lot of fishing. So he sails through that area, and he never makes it over to the America part, the Alaska part, because what ends up happening to him? Jaden?
He gets stranded on this. No, I don't know. But it says on a deserted island.
Yeah, his ship got wrecked, and he ended up dying in this desolate island he was stranded on, and he died. And then the island is eventually named after him. But the people that were with him on these explorations continued over and started to settle in Alaska. So Russia were the first people besides the natives that were there, Russia were the first people to settle in Alaska. And where was it that their first permanent settlement? Where was their first permanent settlement in Alaska, the Russians, Alexis?
Kodiak Island.
On Kodiak Island, and the name of it was Three Saints Bay. The first white, and the reason I put white settlement is because the natives were already there. And that's why we put white settlement, because the Russians were the first white settlements. Three Saints Bay right here. Okay, Kodiak Island. Now, does anyone know the name of these islands here? What are those islands called in Alaska that go off the tip? Does anyone know what they're called? Alexis? They're the Aleutian Islands. And so the natives there, the Aleut natives, what was starting to happen to them because of all the Russians that were coming around nearby? What was happening to these natives that were already on the islands that they were starting to settle on? What started happening to them, Melanie? What was happening to the natives? Because
They were not there anymore because everybody was pushing them out.
not really quite there. Chayton?
they had no immunity to European diseases, and then once they were exposed, it hit them hard.
Yeah, the Russians were bringing over these diseases that natives had never seen before. Their immune system wasn't able to take care of it like they were for the Russians, and started dying off from a lot of these diseases. Okay, so these Russians come, they start setting up fur trade centers, and then more Russians continued to come over, and then they started to work their way to the mainland of Russia. Okay, so this is really early on in settlement of Alaska. And if we move on then to the 19th century, okay, so we've got our settlement. A lot of settlements throughout Alaska have been made. And now they want to start working on communication and being able to communicate, pretty much around the world if possible. And what was created to be able to establish this new line of communication? They wanted to establish a line of communication between Europe, Asia, and America. And what was this line of communication called, Lexi? It was a telegraph. So in 1865, they started to prepare this telegraph line over to Siberia. What war is going on in 1865, by the way? Ethan? Civil War is going on, and they're using the Civil War in the they're using the telegraph in the United States to spread dispatch articles and things going on about the war. Andrew, don't put that away and follow along. So they wanted to kind of set up this new this telegraph line, and they kind of got up to Alaska, so there's a telegraph line there, and then the telegraph line went across, so that we could have communication with all these different places. So it established a line of communication between Europe and America. And that started in 1865. They called it the Alaska-Siberian Telegraph. Okay, so now communication is starting to spread, which is good. It's a positive thing. So Russia is still kind of, it's still theirs. But, so 1865, Civil War ends in 1865 too, by the way, and poor little Lincoln, he dies, he gets killed, and who knows who his vice president is that takes over? Do you know what his name is? Ethan? Johnson takes over as president. So Johnson, he's in the middle of rebuilding the United States, and up comes this chance for him to be able to purchase Alaska. Him, along with his Secretary of State, William Seward, purchased Alaska. And how much did we get Alaska for? Jaden?
It was 7.2, either million or billion.
Million. $7.2 million, which was about 2 cents per acre.
That's actually really good.
Heck of a deal. And so there was mixed reactions there between from people. Some people thought it was an excellent deal, and it was going to be great for the country, resources, new land, able for us to be able to expand. And others thought it was the worst bargain ever that a Seward got. And what did they kind of call his purchase of Alaska, right? Seward's Folly, like it was a joke. The reason Russia kind of wanted to get rid of it was because they were worried about being easily attacked there, so they just wanted to get rid of it. We purchased it, 2 cents an acre. Well, if you want to purchase a nice piece of land today, maybe farmland or something, farmland goes for about $12,000 an acre. A good piece would go $15,000. Could you imagine? Can you imagine that? So it was a really, really good deal, and it will prove to be great land and great resources for us to have.
Is there like an equivalency we could find? Would that be in today's currency?
Yeah, there is an app for that. I'm not sure what it would be off the top of my head. We can look that up if we have time at the end to see what it would be. Ethan?
Was Alaska affected in any way during the Cold War?
Not really.
The Alaska War.
Not really. Okay. So there's kind of things going on in the 19th century. Now towards the end of the 19th century, the end of the 1800s, what huge event started to bring more people to Alaska? What happened that was starting to bring more people? Combs? Oh. The gold rush. So in 1896, in August of 1896 is when they discovered gold. And so this big gold rush happened, for 3 years. And the gold rush, as soon as people found out and heard that there was gold found, like it spread to San Francisco and Seattle, hundreds of thousands of people wanted to come to Alaska. It was like a stampede of people. And it was very difficult to get there. Okay, you can see all the different people. And so it triggered this stampede of people wanting to come, but it was really, really hard. So not hundreds of thousands of people went there, but between 30 and 40,000 people got there. And this one to the left, this is people traveling through the land of Alaska, trying to get to where the gold is so they can start looking for gold. And of those 40,000 people that headed over for gold, about how many people struck gold?
4,000.
4,000, and of those 4,000, not too many people became wealthy. Many people lost everything they had coming there. They went, got poor. So not too many people became wealthy from this gold rush. They ended up losing everything they had, and they're stuck in Alaska.
Is that picture right there individual people in a long
Yes,
line?
it is. So I think it's the only way they could travel through that little opening, possibly. So they did get people from there, but, everybody heard about this gold, and they wanted to be rich and wealthy, and they go there, and barely anybody finds gold. Okay? So those are some pretty big, important events that happened in the 19th century. Let's move to the 20th century. In the 20th century, pretty big, lot of stuff going on, lots of big wars. In the 1940s, what big war is going on? Brandon?
The bombing of Dutch Harbor.
What war is going on, Ethan? World War II is going on in the 1940s. And what event happened, major event happened on December 7th, 1941? Chase? Bombing of Pearl Harbor. If you go home tonight and ask your parents that date, they'll know it. Everybody knows it. If they don't, you should probably tell them to get a history book out and start studying. Or maybe you could teach them. But not a lot of people know this one. In 1942, which is 6 months later, 6 months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japan bombed Dutch Harbor. Anybody watch Deadliest Catch?
Yeah.
I think that's where they sail out of. So Dutch Harbor. Here's Dutch Harbor in the Aleutian Islands. Okay? They come and bomb it. June 3rd, they send some, their pilots come over and the aircrafts in the nighttime. And what they expect to find are a bunch of aircraft carriers, and tons of airfields, and they don't. So instead, they just basically started bombing the barracks, which is where the guys stay and sleep, and just dropped bombs all over the barracks, and 25 people were killed. So now it's not as huge of a deal as the one in the Pearl Harbor, but it's pretty major. And not a lot of people know that, they wanted to come over, and again, they were attacking the United States. So this is another attack on the United States. Even though it's not a state yet, it's a territory, and it is the United States. So Japan comes over. Hawaii wasn't a state either. So they attacked us twice over here on our own land. Yeah.
Were civilians killed in that?
I think it was just servicemen. 25 servicemen.
Civilians.
Huh?
There were no civilians?
No, just the guys that were in the barracks. Alexis?
First, civil Japan now, though, aren't
Yeah.
they? Is North Korea.
Right.
Cuba.
Right. Well, Cuba we're starting to get more friendly with. So World War II ends, and now we move into the 50s. And what is the year that Alaska finally becomes a state? Burley?
March 30th, 1967.
No.
Oh. I'm stiff.
No, you're not.
January 3rd, 1959.
59. So this is recent, guys. This is not that long ago. Okay? 1959, Alaska becomes a state. Mr. Larson was in here first hour, and he told us he remembers when this happened. So there are people you could probably discuss with that remember it happening. It may not have been a big deal to us down here in the lower 48s or in Iowa, but it was a big deal for them in Alaska. Alaska, it's much, much larger landmass than Texas. Way larger than California. So we now have this huge state that stretches into the eastern hemisphere. Only state that does that. The international date line had to be bent so that Alaska could remain in the same day Otherwise, it would have been in 2 separate days, so they had to change that. Ethan?
I thought Alaska was the last state.
Hawaii. Same year. Alaska, then Hawaii came on just a little bit, not too long after Alaska. So Alaska, January 3rd, right at the beginning of 1959, and then a little bit later in the year, Hawaii became a state. Okay? So kind of interesting that, they had to shift the international dateline to make it in the same day. I thought that was quite interesting. Okay, we'll move on into the 80s. We're in current time now. For me, I say current time because I was alive in the 80s. 1983, they have their own time zone. It's called the Alaska Standard Time. How many hours difference are they from us? How many hours different?
5.
3.
3. So what time is it there? Look at the time.
8:34.
8:34. So they're probably just starting school in Alaska, unless, maybe they started there. But they're just getting started with school while we're just getting ready to get going to eat lunch. Every part of Alaska is in the standard time, Alaska time zone, except for this little bitty part of the Aleutian Islands over here are in the Hawaii time zone. If they can move the international dateline, why didn't they just... I don't understand that. They moved to the international dateline, so why didn't they move over the Alaska time zone so that every single part's in it? I don't get it.
I don't understand why they had to move the dateline. What would have happened?
Okay, listen. It's not a real line that doesn't really move.
I
It's
know that.
just-
It's just why would they? What bad would have happened? If they
Okay, let's think of it this way. Let's say here in command, let's say a line goes, the international dateline is here, and it cuts through the middle of our school. Tuesday here and Monday in Mrs. Gilbert's room.
That'd be awesome.
Kind of a big deal. So that's why. Huh?
Well,
The daylight doesn't change, no.
does it
The
go
day-
all the way around the world, or is it only on one side?
Goes around the world. You can see it on the globe. It's a confusing thing, I know. All right, very last thing we're going to talk about is a very huge environmental disaster made by humans that happened in the late 1980s. And what was that huge environmental disaster, Burley?
It was an oil spill.
An oil spill. The Exxon oil company, they had a ship that was a tanker going to California, and it was carrying 55 million gallons of oil, and it had an accident, and of those 55 million, 10 million gallons of oil spilled into the Prince William Sound, and you can imagine all of the environmental people and the environmental groups got all in an uproar about this, which,
Is it still in there
Fine.
happening like
there was another one a couple of years ago down in the Gulf, the BP one.
is it still in there?
They got as much of it cleaned up as you can. I'm sure there's remnants of it.
When my friends were in college,
Hey.
89 was the year I graduated from college. And one of my friends who was studying biology, she actually went up there and helped to clean all the penguins.
Yeah, because all the animals and stuff had to be cleaned because they were just covered in it and they were alive, and you can't just leave them. So,
So what's
hey, whoa! Now listen, we can have good conversation, but we can't have a million sidebars going on. If you want to share something, you have to raise your hand, okay? But a lot of these animals that got, many were killed, and it caused a huge problem for their wildlife. But then some had to be cleaned up, and for years there was a court case going on in settlements and trying to get Exxon to pay, and they did. It took a while, but they finally did. So this was a huge environmental disaster for the state, and it was the largest until 2010. There was another one that happened, but this is the biggest one for Alaska. Okay, we will be having a quiz tomorrow on the Alaska history that we talked about today, plus the Iditarod history notes that we talked about last week or so. So make sure you study not only today's notes, but the Iditarod history notes. All right? I want you guys to put a newspaper on your desk for me, please.